worth what we're asking the young men and women to do, not only in terms of service, but for the rest of the American people, for the costs associated with that. As a father who has children who are serving today, I'm particularly acutely aware of some of those considerations. So I think first and foremost we have to understand the gravity of the situation. And I know that we're not always going to get a full complement of information because some of that is classified. I understand that, I respect that. I spent some time as an intelligence officer and I get how important it is to protect that information. But I do believe that there has to be a substantial threat. It has to be an imminent threat. And it has to justify the use of force after all diplomacy has failed.
Do you believe that the situation in Iran qualifies for that substantial and immediate threat?
I'm not a member of Congress. I don't have access to all of the information that the administration and the Department of War have, that they made the decision first with Midnight Hammer and subsequently with Epic Fury. I will say this, it's critically important that members be briefed, especially on the Senate Armed Services and the House Armed Services Committee, and I would like nothing more than to see those bodies in concert with the Department of War and the administration when these very important decisions are executed.
You spent a lot of time talking about the pipeline. If you get to Congress, would you vote to rescind the tax credits that are basically fueling the pipeline?
So it's a very good question, Kay, and there are two different tax credits, so you have to break them both down. 45Q, 45Z, they do different things. Most of the farmers that I speak with today in IA-04 are not crazy about the tax credits. They associate it with part of the Green New Deal from the previous presidential administration. That said, many of them recognize that they have the ability to elevate the price of corn. Let's talk about that in the first quarter of 2027 after I'm a member of Congress and I see where we're at with those things. I will tell you this, I think it's critically important that people on both sides of the pipeline issue sit down in civil discourse. And I've led on this issue. Let me tell you specifically how. Earlier this year, when the Siouxland Chamber of Commerce had Des Moines Day at the Capitol, over the noon hour, we always bring in a keynote. We've had Director Durham, we've had Governor Reynolds, we've had the Attorney General, we've had many, many people with high levels in state government. And this year we elected to bring in Joe Griffin, who represents Summit Carbon Solutions, and we brought in a gentleman. We first reached out to Congressman Steve King. Congressman wasn't available. He asked a board member to sit in on that dialogue. So in my capacity as the president of the Siouxland Chamber of Commerce, I put that dialogue together. And those two individuals came together in a public forum, and I thought they were, we talk about the importance of civil discourse. And I'm a very strong advocate of that. I understand how important it is. The rising temperature, I think there's a Des Moines Register fan around that says we cover the political heat in Iowa, and you certainly do. We need to take the temperature down a little bit. We need to focus on civil discourse. We need to focus on respecting people who don't share our exact values and opinions on every single thing. But to that end, I brought those parties together, and they sat down and they conversed, and to this day they continue to have a dialogue trying to find a mutually beneficial resolution, and I'm a strong advocate for that.
Over the past week, at least 7 administration officials have been in Iowa. What do you think that says about how national Republicans view this year's election?
Well, I'm not sure that it communicates anything other than the importance to the administration of holding the House and the Senate. And I don't think that's any different than any other year. We all recognize that these are going to be very tight elections in Iowa. And I will do everything in my power to make sure I'm successful in IA-04. If I can help others in my party be successful, you can be assured that I'll do my best to help them be successful. But I think this is a manifestation of the administration and other high-ranking government officials trying to hold their majorities, which certainly makes sense. And just as, so I saw President Obama do a commercial for the Senate, the Democratic Senate candidate, Josh Turek. So they recognize that as well. That's something that's occurring on both sides of the aisle.
The current member of Congress from the 4th District has declined to participate in the earmark process. Iowa's other 3 members of Congress have done so, and some years they've been bringing $20, $25, $30 million to their districts. If you're elected, do you plan to participate in that community support funding process?
It's an excellent question, and the answer in a word is yes. I'm a fiscal conservative, but I want to underscore that the way the current system is set up, there is an opportunity for us to access federal funds and to help the citizens in our congressional district. In my hometown, there are 2 critically important projects right now. One of them is the 185th Air Refueling Wing of the Iowa Air National Guard, which is in desperate need of infrastructure investment in its runway. The fact of the matter is they used to fly F-16s off that runway, which is a single-seat fighter. They now fly KC-135 refueling tankers, which are much, much heavier. That takes a toll on the infrastructure. At the time they converted, the federal government and the then Department of Defense said, we're going to reinvest in this infrastructure, make sure you have what we need. 9/11 intervenes, all the dollars get refocused to the war on terror, and some 20 years later, Sioux City is still flying off a runway that needs to be invested in. That's a perfect candidate for an earmarked project, and I will support those because I recognize the necessity for that federal support.
There's a lot of controversy around the proposed data center in Salix. How, if elected, how would you approach kind of the topic of data centers, annexing land? I know it's not a local issue, and kind of balancing economic development.
Sure, it is a local issue, and as I've said, I've spent 20 plus years working on economic development. The data center issue is something that, much like the Summit Carbon Solutions Pipeline, we need to bring disparate parties together and sit down and say, where are we on this? What can we do to facilitate dialogue, to help those who are opposed understand some of the positive things, and for those who are positive to understand why residents of the Salix community are opposed. You have to have dialogue to make progress. But I would also add, as someone who's worked on economic development for as long as I have, rural economic development is very, very important. It's very rare to see projects that bring the kind of capital investment, the number in terms of job creation, and the total compensation packages that are reflected in these. We want to make sure that everybody on both sides understands the pros and cons, and we have a thoughtful, deliberative discussion rooted in civil discourse.
Dave Dawson was here on the Soapbox. He talked a little bit about this, and then he answered questions about your meetup at a county fair.
Yes.
So why was that a big deal to you?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to civil discourse, Kay. We've seen too much tension, too much vitriol, sometimes even spreading to violence, and it doesn't need to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. We have the unique opportunity in this country to settle our political differences with ballots, not bullets. I'm very, very proud of that. And Dave and I had our respective party booths not very far away. We shared a glance. We both gravitated to the back of those booths and then walked toward one another, exchanged a handshake and some pleasantries. And my commitment at that time was to make sure that our McGowan for Iowa campaign remains rooted in civil discourse. I know that my opponent and I are going to disagree on the issues, and that's okay. But we need to do that without being disagreeable. We need to elevate the conversation and be an example and role models to others. And I think Dave is a person of the caliber and character to do that, and I will join him in that commitment.
Would you debate him?
Absolutely. And we've said that from the very beginning. Listen, somebody's created a false narrative that our campaign is not debating. I would urge you to go to KSCJ Radio, and you can find that on primary election night in an interview with Woody Gottberg, I stated with no ambiguity, there will be debates. What we're working on is the schedule for that, who will host those, where those will be, and I have some personal familial obligations related to my children's commitments to serve in the armed forces that we want to make sure we navigate. And back to Kay's question, that's really part of the, I thought, very pleasant conversation and exchange that David and I had, because he understood that. And so, yeah, we will certainly debate one another as we get closer to the fall.
I think going back to Fred
So am I. I interned for him, okay? In 1987, I was what they called Gopher's Gopher. So in Washington, D.C. Yes. If you visit my website, there's a section that says snapshots, and there's a picture of Congressman Grandy and I in front of his office door in 1987 in Washington, D.C.
Well, at least you weren't the purser, which he was on the
Yes,
show.
of course, I remember. I'm old enough to remember the Love Boat. But I want to say this about Fred, an incredibly bright and articulate individual. Many people have lost sight of the fact that he was educated at Harvard. This is a man of tremendous intellectual substance, and it was a great honor for me to work for him.
I believe he served on the House Ag Committee, as did Congressman King, as is Congressman Feenstra. Are you hoping to serve on the Ag Committee as well?
So I recognize the importance of agriculture, value-added ag. It's what I've done in terms of recruiting companies, leading large projects like CF, which was over $1 billion, closer to $2 billion in capital investment. So those are decisions that get made by the steering committee. I will tell you that I hope to be a member, the freshman representative to steering committee, which is a tall order. I'm not afraid to say that. I may not be successful, but I'm going to do everything I can to represent Iowa as effectively as possible. That begins with trying to get on steering and having a voice in who gets to serve on what committees. And if offered the opportunity to serve on the Ag Committee and represent the 4th District, I will absolutely say yes. Does that mean that's what I'm going to be offered? I also have a military background. I also have a legal background. So they're going to look at a lot of different things for Chris McGowan, and I'll do everything I can to basically reflect the values and be the voice of IA-04.
Regarding the civil discourse, President Trump often calls his political opponents things like scum and traitors, and said he was glad Robert Mueller is dead. I mean, do you feel that he sets a good example for the kind of political discourse you'd like to see?
So President Trump has his own unique style, and far be it from me to question or criticize the commander-in-chief. I haven't gone through or been subjected to what he and his family have been subjected to, but I will tell you that Chris McGowan, the candidate representing the Republican Party in Iowa 4, has every intention of maintaining a commitment to civil discourse throughout this campaign. All right, guys.
Thank you.